Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. Arun Bhargav, for creating this opportunity for me to share some pages from the beautiful cultural history of the Indian subcontinent with all of you. And welcome everybody to this journey through the ancient art of India. The art whose stated purpose it is, as mentioned in the Chitra Sutra, the earliest known treatise on art making, the art whose purpose it is to aid us on the philosophic path. Last Sunday, we had spoken about how we had spoken about Bhakti Yoga. We had spoken about how our emotions are taken, and through a deep and personalized love of the divine, we are helped on the path towards knowledge. On the first Sunday, we had spoken of the ancient Indian philosophy of aesthetics, in which it is understood that the aesthetic experience, when we see something beautiful, that moment is akin, in fact, to the final ecstasy of salvation. For in that moment, the veils of illusion are lifted, and we are seeing the grace which underlies all that there is. And today we are going to be coming back to that. We are going to be dealing with the beautiful art of the Gupta period, the 4th, 5th centuries CE. And here you will see again how beauty and our response to grace is used to create harmony. It is used to create peace. It is used to take us away from the ceaseless clamor of the material world around us, to take us to a realm of peace where we can look within, and in that moment of grace, we are blessed. And the art of the Gupta period is a very fine example. This period of time is a very fine example of the use of this grace, this sublime grace, which takes us far from the material world to that joy which can be found within us, to help us to understand our kinship with all that there is. And you will see the marvelous sense of naturalism in Indian art. This sense of naturalism is not at all like the academic realism of modern art or European art, which reached India by the 19th century. This naturalism is a way of capturing the inner essence of things, that which moves within, that which moves the leaves on the trees, that which makes the bud come out of the stem and flower. It is that essence of all that there is. It is a different kind of naturalism. It is not a preoccupation with shadows and how things look in optically real terms, but it is that essence, that grace which underlies what we see. And indeed, the period of the Gupta period art is a fine example of that. On the second Sunday, we had spoken about the creation of deities in Indian art and how these personify concepts and the qualities within us. How by looking upon these deities, we awaken those fine qualities within us till finally they would grow within us and fill us completely. And at that point, you have become the deity. And all this prepares us, this understanding prepares us for the film which you're going to see. And my many thanks are owed to Doordarshan. This film is one of my series of 26 films on the sculpture of India. As last time we had spoken about the series of 26 films on the paintings of India. And I must say that Doordarshan must be one of the finest public broadcasters of the world to have over the years sponsored the making of so many deeply researched films with no eye on what they call TRP, with no eye on the commercial side of things. It is indeed wonderful of Doordarshan, and I'm deeply grateful to them. My many thanks also to Sujata Chatterjee, my partner, who makes all that I do possible. And I would request Mr. Arun Bhargav to please run the first film now. Thank you so much.
In 320 AD, Chandragupta I founded the Gupta Empire. His capital was at Pataliputra in present-day Bihar. He ushered in an age of well-being and prosperity, an age in which all aspects of culture flowered. One of the finest periods of mankind when great thinkers attained noble heights of achievement. The period of Gupta rule, known as a Golden Age, lasted up to the year 467 AD. Kalidasa, the greatest Sanskrit poet and playwright, lived during this period. So did the astronomer and mathematician Aryabhat, the first person to accurately calculate the solar year. Since early times, the philosophic belief was in the oneness of all that there is. The world of separated forms around us was considered to be an illusion. In the search for the truth, the veils of illusion had to be lifted so that we could see beyond. In the 1st century, deities in human form had been created in Indian art to provide a support to minds not prepared to comprehend the formless abstract. These deities were many, all different aspects of the one formless truth.
In India, we have always thought that there are multiple ways to get to the spiritual or the divine, and that divine, the Brahman, that is formless, actually can be worshipped also by symbols of images. So in that sense, deities are seen in their manifest form, in their physical form, as a way to connect to the divine that may be formless. But that is completely understood and accepted as part and parcel of how we look at image making and how we look at deities. Whereas for many, many Hindu gods, it's not like people think that there was a real God that was alive. We understand the mythology of God for something beyond just an everyday. So we don't get so concerned about the realistic notion of a God, but in fact we understand the symbolic value of the deity that gets us to a higher plane.
The human form had to be created which rose above itself. It was not a human form caught in the web of the material world. It was an embodiment of that which was eternal, that which was still. undisturbed by turmoil and cravings. Meditating upon such a form, devotees awakened the best within themselves. They rose above the pains created by their own desires and confusion.
A kind of perfected and transformed, transfigured human body can suggest to us the profoundest and most important philosophical ideas.
Mathura on the banks of the river Yamana in North India had been a great center of art since the Shunga period in the 1st and 2nd centuries BC. By the 1st century AD, some of the earliest images of Indic deities were made here out of the local red sandstone. By the 5th century, the figures had become slender, and there was a delicacy of treatment. A look of tranquility had come upon them. The garment was indicated by a series of folds, yet it did not hide the graceful body, which was the manifestation of the ideal state of being. The inward look upon the face perfectly expresses the rising of the spirit above the world of manifest reality.
Those Gupta pieces are so incredibly special, is that they embody the idea of spirituality and sensuousness, which is so unique to Indian art, where it is not simply about spirituality that is negating the body, but it is taking the body and moving to the spiritual dimension, which I think is really quite beautiful.
Mathura had long interacted with Sarnath on the banks of the Ganga. It was here that the Mathura tradition flowered. It was here that the form was created to express that which is the spiritual state of the Buddha, one who has left behind the turbulence of the material world. 3 standing Buddhas, one of AD 474 and 2 of AD 477, bring us the achievement of Sarnath. Behind lowered eyelids, the look is within. The mind is not disturbed by the illusions of the passing world. It is still. It is not the conquest of the world, but the conquest of the mind, which is the theme here. All that there is one, and it is to be found within, in the endless peace of the mind. Such an art is not concerned with outward ornamentation, and the apparel has all but disappeared. Even the folds of the garment are gone. The smooth planes of the body blend effortlessly. A form has been given to bliss itself. It is unmarred by the blemishes and imperfections of ordinary mortals. Inscriptions state that these were made beautiful through the science of chitra or art making. It is around this time that the Chitra Sutra, the oldest known treatise on art, was penned, out of traditions which were ongoing. In Indic art, the emphasis was never on individual problems and their solutions. The best and distilled knowledge of the finest minds was passed down and constantly modified. Canons guided the artist. Individual achievement and works of rare beauty were born out of the immediate experience of the artist, of the visualized reality itself.
When you look at a piece like this, that this is a cult image, an image which really expresses something spiritual, something sacred. And in that sense, I think there's nothing compared with Indian art.
A seated Buddha of this period is depicted preaching the first sermon at Sarnath. He is seated in a yogic posture of meditation, seen in Indic art from the time of the Indus Valley civilization. His hands are in the Dharma Chakra Pravartan Mudra, indicating that he is setting into motion the wheel of Dharma, or the law. The chakra or wheel is also seen below. So are deer, indicating that the setting is in the deer park at Sarnath. On both sides are made rampant leogryphs, symbolizing the regal roar and the authority of the Buddha's message. These became a constant feature in Buddhist art from this period. At Sanchi, new temples and additions were made in the Gupta period. 4 Buddha statues were placed at the entrances of the Great Stupa in the mid-5th century. As in other depictions of this period, the Enlightened One personifies an inner calm, where the noise and confusion of the material world fade away, where the armies of Mara have failed. In the first quarter of the 5th century, 20 rock-cut caves were carved out of the hill at Udaigiri, not very far from Sanchi. These are the earliest surviving Hindu temples. The temple was conceived as a home for the deity. We leave behind the mundane world to enter the peace and dark of the interior for the darshan. Looking upon the deity, who is made to convey the eternal concepts, we awaken the best within us. We are graced by the act of seeing the deity, that is darshan. It is a concept which is central to Indic thought and continues till today. It is only here at Udaigiri that we still see the context in which Hindu deities were created in the Gupta period. Though these are the earliest remains, it is clear that both iconographic and artistic concepts had been clearly formulated already. The most magnificent representation here is of the Narvaraha Avatara of Vishnu, with the body of a man and the head of a boar. In this story, the Lord appeared in the form of a boar to save the earth goddess Bhudevi. All Indic religious myths are meant to operate at several levels. Besides the story of the rescue of the goddess from the waters, it is also the depiction of the saving of mankind from the ocean of ignorance. Majestic power is obvious in the form of the Varaha, who effortlessly lifts the earth goddess. The precariousness of her position emphasizes the drama of the moment. From the Gupta period onwards, the Varaha Avatara becomes one of the most popular themes in sculpture. On the right of the relief, Cave 6 presents an elaborate carved doorway. Dwarapalas, or guardians of the doorway, are made on both sides. Their muscular bodies and diaphanous garments display the early Gupta style. Ganesha, the elephant-headed deity, is made to our left as we approach the door, a feature we will see in Hindu temples to follow. Two representations of Vishnu are made on the facade. The one on the right has personifications of his attributes. The mace symbolizes the power of knowledge, and the chakra, or wheel, stands for the universal mind. The iconography of the Mahishasur-Mardani was fully created by the 1st or 2nd century. She is Durga, destroying the demon buffalo or Mahisha. She has 12 arms which indicate her superhuman powers. An Ekmukh Linga or one-faced linga is enshrined in cave 4. The simple treatment of the face and of the locks of hair place it in the early 5th century. The image portrays the unification of the creative energies of the world with the intellect. Halfway up the Udaygiri hill is a Jaina cave. It has a freestanding portico and has the appearance of a typical small Gupta period shrine. At Diogarh, near Jhansi in Uttar Pradesh, stands one of the earliest surviving Hindu temples. It is dedicated to Vishnu and is dated to about AD 500. The temple faces west and has an elaborate doorway. As compared to Udaygiri, the lintels and door jambs here have multiplied. There is a profusion of foliated designs, mithunas or loving couples and guardian figures. On 3 sides of the temple are niches which depict different avatars of Vishnu. On the south face is made the Anantasayana Vishnu, who reclines upon the serpent Shesha, which means remainder. The Lord's wife Lakshmi massages his feet, personifying the concept of bhakti, in which the devotee gives himself over in adoration of the divine. Below are made the demons Madhu and Ketabha, and the personified weapons of Vishnu, who keep the demons in check. On the north of the temple is the story of Gajendra Moksha. The Gajendra, or elephant, was seized by a serpent, and a tug of war continued between the two for 1,000 years. Finally, the elephant appealed to Vishnu, who saved him. It is the story of the misguided intellect, caught in the web of Maya, or illusion, till it is saved by true knowledge. These deities are reflections of the peace, the joy, the sublime stillness which we can find within us. They are aids to our journey within.
I think that one can see these things in the world around one if one knows where to look. It's a matter of looking, I don't want to use a cliche, but it's a matter of looking with the inner eye as well as with the purely physical eye. That after all, if you hear a beautiful piece of music, it will move one in the same way. It plugs one in, as it were, to this world of the spirit, the world of exaltation.
Large numbers of brick temples were made in the Gupta period. Owing to the fragile nature of the material, almost all of them have been destroyed by the passage of time. The sculptural decoration of these temples was carried out in terracotta. This life-sized Ganga from the Shiva temple at Ahichhatra in Uttar Pradesh is a fine example of such sculpture. The sublime forms made in the Gupta period are created out of devotion and a stillness of the mind. The desire or the ambition to create a great work of art is tempered always by the understanding that this too is, after all, a leela, a dynamic play of the world of illusion. It is not just the works of art which are ephemeral, the deities too are but a path towards the truth. They prepare us and bring us a little closer to being able to comprehend the truth, which is finally of the oneness of all that there is. It is beyond form.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the greatness of this art, the greatness of all the finest art, is from this recognition that even the art is not going to last. And here we recognize the fact that even the deities who are being made, after all, are only a path towards a final knowledge. And this knowledge is beyond form itself. And yet, to lose the preoccupations with the material world, to express that inner calling, to express that inner joy, the artist makes these forms to share the heritage which he has inherited, to share the knowledge which he has inherited from his forefathers. And all of us respond to the beauty and grace of the image in order to awaken those fine qualities within us. And all this would create a peace. All this would create a harmony, a sense of harmony. And therefore, a more placid frame of mind where we may be able to look within, where we may not be so disturbed by the constant turbulence of the material world. But finally, all this too is expected or hoped to be left behind as we hope to achieve a truer knowledge, a knowledge of that which may be eternal. I would be very happy at this stage to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Well, enjoyed it beautifully. Thank you very much. And as that gentleman commented, you have to have that special keen eye to see the beauty in those sculptures and bring the spirituality and the creative energy of these artists together the way you did it. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Very kind of you. Thank you so much.
You mentioned Mathura, and Mathura is normally associated with Lord Krishna, and this seemed to be the Buddhist period art. So how that reconciliation takes place?
As I have been pointing out through this series of lectures, there was really no need for any reconciliation. The the idea that the ancient religions were, the ancient faiths or the ancient beliefs were religions, separated religions in the Western sense of the word, is a colonial construct. We know from all the ancient inscriptions of India, and more than 95% of all the history that we know about ancient India comes from these very inscriptions. So we know from the ancient inscriptions of India that in every single family that we know about, there was somebody worshipping a Hindu deity, somebody worshipping a Buddhist or a Jaina deity, and these were not separated religions. The study of the art also very clearly shows it is the same artists who are making the art of all these deities, all these paths. It is in the rule of the same kings that the Buddhist, Jaina, and Hindu art was all being created. And as we see, as we have been showing in the past few Sundays, the great Buddhist art of ancient India was in fact all of it created in the rule, during the rule of kings who were personally worshipping Hindu deities. So it is only a colonial construct that they were separated religions, and in fact, there is another colonial construct that there was conflict between these faiths. So, in point of fact, there wasn't. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes.
Benoy, one thing I noted, there were, even when there were cave temples, that's the starting ones, and there is a Jaina cave temple and the Hindu cave temple are together, right? And then, so, family member can go here and there. And I think in our temple also it's the same, because we have the Jaina temple in our temple and also Hindu temples. And philosophically, they may be, one may be totally disbeliever, or you can say Anishwarvad, and one can be, believers. So they all coexisted, and I mean, at least in our mind, we have no difference. I mean, we go and bow to Jaina gurus also, and our, deities also.
I'm so happy to hear this. It is a keeping up of the early Indian traditions, where all these were always and constantly together. You would visit the caves of Ellora in Maharashtra. You would find Buddhist, Hindu, and Jaina caves.
Exactly.
You would, even at a much later period, if you were to visit the temples of Khajuraho, you will find the Hindu temples and the Jaina temples. And of course, on the walls of the Jaina temples, you will find the most beautiful representations of all the Hindu deities. In fact, even today, if you were to visit the Buddhist temples of Japan, you will find there the representations of all the Vedic deities. So I am very glad to hear that your temple is also keeping up these traditions. And in point of fact, it is just different paths, but it is all the same philosophy. It is all the philosophy which understands the Maya or Mithya of the material world. It is all a philosophy which helps to take us away from the illusion and to find the peace that can be found within us. Thank you.
I am puzzled by the notion of illusion, because that word implies that what we experience on a daily basis somehow isn't real. Now, there is a different way of expressing unity that comes from Kashmir Shaivism, which says nothing exists that is not Shiva. That's a different formulation. And one wouldn't say about the manifestation of Shiva all around us, including ourselves, that they are somehow not real, that they are illusory. So I wonder how you bring those concepts together.
Yes, Indian philosophy does express itself very beautifully and in many voices and in many ways. As a matter of fact, when you speak of Shiva, you would remember my speaking about the great Chidambaram temple, the most revered Shiva temple of Tamil Nadu, in which not only is the most formful depiction of Shiva made, the Nataraja, in all the splendor of the cosmic dance, but simultaneously the most Upanishadic, the deepest depiction of Shiva is also made, which is nothing at all. There is nothing that you see. Marvelous depiction of the Shivalinga, where you do not see anything at all. So yes, John, this is the beautiful way in which Indian philosophy helps each seeker to gradually understand what it is about. And as the Chitra Sutra points out at a very early period, that the deities are made in order to help us when we are not prepared for dealing with something as abstract as the Nirgun or the Arupa, the formless. So deities are made in order to make it easier for us to move on the path towards knowledge. But the knowledge is always that of the formless eternal. So that is the final knowledge which is sought, and all the deities are wonderful paths towards that knowledge. And in this ephemeral world that we live in, where you know and I know that we are not going to last as personalities. Everything around us is not going to last as personalities. But there may be something which is eternal, and we reach forward towards that knowledge. The most wonderful thing about Indic thought is that there is no great certainty which is expressed. There is no saying that only this is true. There are beautiful suggestions which are made, marvelous suggestions which are made, which appeal to you, which appeal to your understanding. And therefore, when they appeal to you, they carry you forward through an imbibing of that knowledge, through a response to that knowledge. And that's what knowledge truly is. Knowledge is something deep within you. It is not something which is told. It is not something which is read or heard. But it is when there is that response within you, a recognition of the truth. That is why the demon upon which Shiva dances is called Apasmara, the demon of the forgetfulness of the truth. The truth is within you. It is for you to reach a point where you are able to revive that knowledge, to know that knowledge, to experience that knowledge. So here we are talking constantly about experiential knowledge, not bookish knowledge, not mere words, but beautiful words and beautiful thoughts are used to express the knowledge in many different ways. And for people who are in different stages of preparation to be able to understand the truth. So it does not take a majority of people in the world and say, you are not prepared to understand, I will not talk to you. But it creates stories and it creates beautiful deities, which brings me to the film which we are going to be seeing now, which is going to take us to the south of India. And it is going to take us to another realm of the personifications which we saw earlier, the personifications which are deities. It will take us to smaller depictions of these deities, more human depictions of the deities. The deities will be depicted with emotions. They will be depicted in lives like our own lives, with relationships, wives and spouses and children, and all of it beautifully designed to help us to recognize the divinity which is in all that there is, the divinity which is within us, and carry us forward to a more peaceful understanding, a less fretful understanding of everything, owing to the recognition of beauty and grace. So we move on to this beautiful and very human depiction of deities. And I will request Mr. Arun Bhargav to please show the next film. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Shekhar.
According to ancient texts, the deity in the sanctum of the Indian temple is depicted closest to its all-pervasive nature. It is a manifestation of the ultimate truth. There also developed a great tradition of Utsavamurtis, or festival images. The deity, in many manifestations of human form, comes out to the streets of the town. Sometimes he performs a journey to a place of pilgrimage. He may be taken for a ritual bath, or even to the seashore to enjoy the breeze. As presented in the ritual texts, the Utsavas are of two kinds. These take place as a regular part of worship, in which the deity may make a circumambulatory tour of the temple, and those which occur once in a week, month, and year. The most important are the grand celebrations called Maha Utsavas, which are annual celebrations. In all these Utsavas, the deity leaves the sanctum and becomes approachable to all. The abstract, all-encompassing reality is given a form which we can relate to. A human form with emotions we can understand, even as a family man with a wife and child. It is the human form, luminous with the beauty of divinity. By about the 8th century, the Utsavamurtis in the temples of Tamil Nadu began to be made in bronze. This tradition of bronzes, which reached its height in the rule of the Cholas, resulted in some of the finest works of Indian art.
A very different tradition of modeling was followed here in India, and particularly in these South Indian bronzes, where unlike the European tradition of using models, the images were all made using mnemonic techniques, whereby the craftsmen were meant to memorize dhyana shlokas, which describe the attributes of various goddesses and gods, and they used the Talamana canon of measurement to essentially visualize the image and then sculpt it out of their own imagination rather than using models.
In the skilled hands of devoted artists, the metal images communicated the majesty and dignity of the deities, as well as the suppleness and dynamic movement of their bodily form. These are remarkably expressive and graceful. They convey the spiritual fervor of the artists who made them. These works of art are a part of a divine architecture where the deity manifests himself in forms which awaken the bliss and the peace within the viewer. These fluid and subtle images are a means of expressing the beauty of the divine, which is in all that we see. In medieval Tamil Nadu, Hindus worshipped their deities in shrines within their homes and in temples. From the time of the devotional saints, from the 6th and 7th centuries onwards, many temples were built. The Chola period from the 9th century saw the increasing emphasis on grand temple structures. Many brick temples were rebuilt, and starting with the early 11th century, the tallest and most impressive temples were made. These edifices were like great cosmic palaces, inhabited by large numbers of deities. The Shaiva Agmas and the Vaishnava Samhitas, the sacred texts which guide the rituals in temples, prescribe the procession of Panchamurtis, or 5 images, in the great temple festivals. With some 40,000 temples in Tamil Nadu, we can see how the art of making bronzes flourished here. Temples dedicated to Vishnu had a limited range of icons. Vishnu was represented with his consorts and in his avatars in human form as Krishna and Rama. The processional images of Shiva present him in many forms. We see him as a family man in the Soma Skanda icon, with his beautiful wife Uma and child Skanda. As Bhikshatana, we see Shiva as the enchanting mendicant. As Veenadhara, we see Shiva as the lord of music. His lower hands would have held the veena, a stringed musical instrument. Many bronzes are also made of Shiva's wife Parvati and their sons Ganapati and Kartikeya. The sacred texts also mention Bhaktotsavas, the festivals of the devotees of the Lord. These celebrate the 63 saints of the Shaiva tradition and the 12 saints of the Vishnu temples. On the day of the procession, the bronze image of the saint is taken in front of the deity, and his compositions are recited before it. The most magnificent image in the bronzes is the Nataraja, Shiva in his cosmic dance. In this dance, he creates and destroys the world. The richness of symbolic meaning in the Nataraja image makes it one of the greatest icons created by man. The circle in which he dances is samsara, the cycle of life and death in this illusory world. In one hand he holds a drum, whose heartbeat sound represents the creation of the world. Complementing the moment of creation is the simultaneous destruction of the cosmos. In his other hand, he holds the fire with which he destroys the world. The lower right hand offers solace to the devotee, granting fearlessness with the Abhay Mudra. The lower left hand points to the raised foot. This foot springs up from the back of the dwarf of ignorance, of forgetfulness of the truth. The dwarf, Apasmara, is crushed under the right foot of Shiva. Under the raised foot, the devotee is promised refuge from the turmoil and confusion of the world of illusion. The dance is wild, as we see from the coils of Shiva's hair which fly in all directions. Yet, the expression of the Lord is serene, and the many limbs are in perfect balance. At the center of all the dynamic movement is the stillness of peace.
I think that notion of serenity or of stillness after agitation, the Shantarasa, is something that animates much Indian art. But it's to be cherished precisely because it's seen against a context of agitation and of non-repose. So, once again, the viewer or the worshipper is not invited to look at a desiccated, dry, abstract idea of serenity. It is actually a hard-won serenity that is placed in counterpoint to the invitations as well as the agitations of the material world. So it's this notion of counterpoint, the interplay of opposites, which for me truly defines the genius of Indic art.
In his hair, Shiva has Ganga, the heavenly river, as she passed through Shiva's locks on her descent to the earth. The Chola artists imaged deities as graceful, languid beings. There is always a sense of repose. Minute details, such as the gentle swelling of bellies, bring these bronzes alive before us. These bronzes also mark great technical achievement in the arts, where metal was flawlessly molded to give form to the intangible. The material never dominates the image, which moves the viewer through the perfection of its beauty. A balance is achieved in the dancing icons, where Sambandar balances on one foot, his arm extended in a posture that is dynamic and graceful. Nuances, such as a heel raised off the ground, show an effortless naturalism which goes far beyond photographic reality. We can relate immediately to the shyness of Parvati as a bride. Her companion gently places her hand on Parvati's back, encouraging her to move forward. The Kalyana Sundaramurti is undoubtedly one of the finest expressions of world art, where individual emotions are translated to a universal plane. As Shiva clasps Parvati's hand when they are married, the onlooker relates to the divine through emotions, which are so closely a part of his own life. We are reminded of the divinity of life in all its moments. Thus, life in the world is fully celebrated. While the bronzes were made, Vedic hymns were chanted and sacred rites were performed at appropriate stages. They were elaborate rituals of establishment, similar to those of the main temple icon, whereby the divine presence was infused in the images. The Utsavamurtis would then reside in the sanctum or close to it. They would receive daily worship, and at the time of the festivals, they would truly come into their own. Besides daily and weekly festivals, most annual festivals last for 11 to 15 days. They are grand and colourful occasions in which the deities are carried through the city streets on palanquins and on vast chariots. The chariots or rathas have tall superstructures which resemble temple towers. Such festivals continue till today as expressions of religious fervour and personalized devotion to the deities. Tamil saints of the 6th to the 9th centuries brought a very special quality of bhakti to religious practice in Tamil Nadu. Bhakti is a wholehearted devotion in which the worshipper becomes so immersed in the adoration of the Lord that he loses the sense of his separate self. It is a joyous path to the ultimate unity with the divine, out of love and its rapture.
It's a matter of mind, isn't it? There can be a very personal relationship with God. It's a personal relationship with something which is probably beyond our comprehension, but at the same time, the surrender is a accepted form of worship, both in the Saivite tradition as well as the Vaishnava tradition. Finally, you are supposed to surrender.
Bhakti is the ultimate and most personalized expression of love of the deity. The poems of the saints left a deep impression upon Tamil culture, which continues till today. The Shaiva saint Appar sings of Shiva. If you could see the arch of his brow, the budding smile on lips red as the kovai fruit, the sweet golden foot raised in dance, the essence of the Utsavamurtis is found in their poems. This is the Lord who has come out of his all-pervasive form in the inner sanctum to be among his people. On the streets he offers darshan, a view of himself. In Indic traditions it is believed that the act of looking upon the divine is an act of receiving grace. The divine is present everywhere. In our recognition of that, we are blessed. The deity is treated as an honored guest and beloved Lord. He receives puja or ritual adoration every day, and in some temples, even up to 8 times a day. Priests wash his feet, bathe and anoint him, rub sandalwood paste on him, and dress and ornament him. He is entertained with song and dance, and hymns of the saints are sung before him. Inscriptions speak of a dazzling array of jewelry which was gifted to the deities. These were given by a wide range of persons, from royalty to merchants, musicians and dancers, and palace maids. Inscriptions also inform us of 400 dancing girls who were brought to live in Tanjavur to dance before the deities. The technique used to make South Indian bronzes is called the lost wax process. First, the image is carefully made out of hard beeswax complete in all its details. Then the wax is covered with layers of clay. The clay-covered model is then heated so that all the wax melts and comes out. What is left is a cavity which exactly replicates the wax image. Next, the molten bronze is poured in through channels in the original design. Once it has cooled, the clay is broken away and the stems of the channel are filed off. During Chola times, the molds were made so perfectly that no further details needed to be carved. However, these days, the fine details are cut after the casting process is over. As the clay mold is lost each time, every bronze is a unique work of art. The early images were made of copper, as is recorded in Chola inscriptions. In later times, images of Panchaloha, or 5 metals, became popular. The constituents, gold, silver, copper, lead and tin, represent the 5 basic elements of which the world is made.
The Sthapati who makes the bronze image, he creates an image with all devotion, and it is seen that he is considered the Acharya at that time, so he is called Achari. He is given cloth, he is given garland, he is given all the gifts. In fact, he is even worshipped. Sacred water is sprinkled on him, and he becomes the divine who makes the divine image.
The passion and the devotion of the Tamil saints and other devotees are well expressed in the words of the saint Sundarar. We see also the deeply personal quality of this worship. Great Lord of Mercy, you have placed yourself in my heart, and now nothing will let me forget you. How could I possibly say that I am not your slave? It is these exquisite images in human form which brought the divine from abstraction to accessibility and even intimacy. The Saint Appar sings, "It is glorious and unceasing, the singing and dancing about the Lord's glory, as devotees sing the praises of the Lord who stood revealed before them." The Utsavamurtis and festivals provide that wonderful occasion when the people may experience the joy of being overwhelmed with devotional feeling.
How wonderful. It is all encapsulated so well in the image of the Kalyana Sundara Murti, the marriage of Shiva and Parvati, where individual emotions are so beautifully taken to a universal plane, and we are able to see the divinity in all of our lives. One's life and all that there is recognized so clearly to be divine. How much grace there is in that when one realizes how beautiful we ourselves are, and all the actions of our life are so beautiful and so graceful. How wonderful indeed. There is so much aesthetics in all this. In fact, there are temples where Shiva is, as you saw, taken to the shrine of Parvati in the Meenakshi temple, and he's put to bed with her, and in the morning they are awoken with the singing of sweet bhajans, and then he's taken back to his own shrine. How marvelous it is! And all this with the ceremonious sound of music and the celebration of the divine. Yes, I was thinking about the fact that in some temples, when Shiva is put to bed with Parvati, her large nose ring is taken off so that it may not scratch Shiva at night. How exquisite, how tenderly the divine is brought into our own lives. So as we have seen, from the basic understanding, from that base of understanding, in fact, that the knowledge that we seek is nirgun or arupa. From that, there are so many paths which are created, paths which create peace within us, paths which create grace within us, to take our thoughts away from the more mundane and the more fretful of the thoughts of the world, of the concerns of the world, to create such a beautiful realm in which we may peacefully and happily be able to explore the reaching out for the divine, for the joy that is within us. I'll be very happy to answer any questions that I may be able to. Thank you very much.
I mean, look, and can you tell us something more about the Chola period? Because, people here may not understand what a great empire Chola was in South India and across like Vietnam and from Vietnam and all over. So it's so maybe we can know a little more about the Chola period.
Yes, in fact, somehow the Gupta period is much better known. Some other periods are somewhat better known, but it may or may not be so well known that the Chola Empire in South India was one of the great empires of India. Mm-hmm. And as you are pointing out, during this period, particularly in the 10th, 11th centuries, under rulers like Raja Chola, expeditions were made, and parts of Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka were also annexed to the Chola Empire. So this was a period of great seafaring. As a matter of fact, there was great shipbuilding also under the Cholas, and this was one of the flourishing periods of Indian civilization. Of course, before that was the period of Pallava rule in Tamil Nadu, which paved the way for the Cholas.
I've got a question for you, Ramji. I was wondering whether you'll be able to give us more glimpses, understanding of Angkor Wat temple.
The Angkor Wat temple is one of the absolutely largest Hindu temples of the world. And it is a fairly unique temple in as much as it is a temple with 5 towers, which is mentioned as the last form of temple which is mentioned in the Vishnu Puran. The precursor to the Angkor Wat temple is found at Masroor in Himachal Pradesh, not very far from Kangra. And at Masroor, there is this earlier 8th century temple, which is the hill has been carved into the temple. It is indeed very, very beautiful. It is partly in ruined state today, but its beauty is still intact. And it is one of those wonders of that period, how a hill is excavated and made into a temple. And it is the precursor. It's a temple with 5 towers. So,
do you have a documentary that you can share?
It is in one of my films, yes, it is.
It would be nice to listen to that directly from you sometimes.
Well, this course is too concise and too brief a course to cover all periods.
Absolutely.
I have, of course, I've made about 146 documentaries on the art and culture of the subcontinent and its reflections in Asia. But surely we'll try to cover as much ground as we can, and I'll try to show you more things in course of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, this was really great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
My pleasure. My pleasure. But all of you should keep the Masroor temple in mind. You see, what happens is that most of the very beautiful places are not on the tourist circuit because it is not convenient for tourism agencies to try to weave in these historically very important and artistically important places. They tend to take tourists to the same places again and again, and they tend to have very commercial interests in mind. They take tourists to those places which have nearby marketing facilities and things like that. So Masroor, not very far from Kangra in Himachal Pradesh, is this beautiful temple. Also, in a better state of preservation, and another absolutely marvelous and lesser known temple is near Kanyakumari. It is at Kalagumalai. There is the Vattuvan Koil. And that again is a whole hill which is carved into a beautiful Shiva temple. And I believe that is a must for people who are interested in Indian art. That must be seen. That is again of about the same period as the Masroor temple. From what I remember, it is 8th, 9th century. So some of these places are really worthwhile to see for those people who may have an opportunity to see them. Thank you.
And one news I heard is in Ujjain, now there is a Mahakal corridor which is coming up, which shows all the stories of Shiva. And Ujjain used to be a big center, but there is being built a big corridor which is 4 times the size of or Kashi corridor. So that will be accessible nice place to go in terms of, all the tourist attraction and everything.
Indeed, Ujjain was one of the great intellectual centers of India, in the heart of India, in central India. And it is at the Mahakal temple at Ujjain has always been a very sacred place. So it is good to know that such activity is happening. Thank you.
So Ujjain is the place where the earlier Greenwich timeline used to go. That was the origin zero time at one time, I guess.
That's correct, yes.
Now it's in England somewhere, Greenwich.
Ujjain, Kanchipuram, places like that were great intellectual centers of India. Marvelous places in ancient times.
No, this is Geeta, and I just have a comment. Dr. Benoy, thank you so much. Every time I, hear you, I think it can get any better, and it just keeps on getting better and better every discourse that you have given us. And I want to thank you again because it has. Now I'm looking at our Indian art with different eyes and different knowledge. So I want to thank you. And hopefully you'll come back and, I know we got one more session, but like Dr. Sane was saying, right? If you can, you have got 146 films or documentaries, and we would love to have you back again and, show us, open our eyes to appreciate our Indian art in a different way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you very much. I'm so glad that you have appreciated it so much. And I must say that you are so generous in your appreciation. Thank you.